Our human brain is designed to work a certain way, designed by nature. So, the human brain is designed to process neurotransmitters through a complex system of neurons that communicate. This process is essential for various functions: mood regulation, overall body functions. So, we're not supposed to be messing around with this too much. Our brain's designed a certain way to keep our species going, to keep us happy and healthy. And read this title here. It says, Superior Pattern Processing is the Essence of the Evolved Human. So I want to come back to that a little later. But keep that in mind. Pattern processing. What is a pattern in dog culture that we refuse to recognize? Are there any patterns in dog culture that are very bad for us that we refuse to recognize? We're not using our prefrontal lobe if we're not recognizing patterns. So next up, I want to show you guys something called aversive processing. So this is how your brain responds to things that your human body knows are not good. Things that are unpleasant or harmful, such as, like noises, something that's too hot, too cold, things like that. Something that's a predator with teeth that can bite you or hurt you or use your resources. And notice that this is crucial for survival. It helps the organism avoid danger. So aversive processing is present even if you don't have a complex prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex, though, plays a specific role in this that we're going to get to. But for example, you don't see like a bird taking on a snake as a pet. You don't see a deer bringing in some coyotes and bobcats to hang out with the little baby deer. You don't see a deer do something like that. So just keep that in mind. This is a big part of our evolution, our humanity, and we are an organism that needs to avoid danger. Yeah. So now we're going to look at something else called neurotransmitter activity. So excessive neurotransmitter activity, like cycling dopamine and serotonin, this can disrupt the balance of excitation and inhibition in the prefrontal cortex. This leads to negative effects on brain function. It can cause imbalance, and it can cause various psychiatric disorders and cognitive issues. Kind of like the pattern recognition and the being concerned about safety. An example about this is pregnant women that all of a sudden don't want anything to do with their dogs. Part of that is just their natural want to survive deep inside their brain. Their brain, quote unquote, knows that dog should not be there, jumping on them, using up their food, making them bend over to pick up dog turds, because it's a safety risk to the fetus. Yeah. So dog owners, we're talking about oxytocin cycling too much in the brain. That is one of the big things about dog owners. They experience increased levels of oxytocin. It is similar to the bonding between parents and children. So this is a parasitic thing, allowing these dogs to hijack our oxytocin system that is designed to work for us, for our fellow humans. We're using it to get quick hits of oxytocin, dopamine, cortisol, then back to oxytocin, then back to serotonin. Yeah. It's associated with feelings of love and attachment. And that is why dog owners think that they love their dogs. Really what they love is that addiction, that next dopamine hit. Yeah. As they say, this enhances the bond between the dogs and their owners. Yeah, it does, but the price of that is it weakens the bond between our fellow humans. AKA, dogs are better, I'd rather have dogs, I trust dogs more, etc., etc. And now here's the new thing that I found. Too much oxytocin can lead to emotional problems. So it's like in the NIH studies that I'm going to post in the description, cycling all of these neurotransmitters faster and faster, getting us stressed because we're worrying about our dog, but then we get relief because we get home and see the dog. Everybody thinks that dogs are relieving stress, yet every single stress-related health issue is on the rise. Well, this is giving us, problems. One of the things here, hopefully you can read this, it says oversensitivity to emotions of others. So this extra oxytocin, it kind of puts you into this like mama bear mode where you're worried about all the little babies. And this is like dog owners. They're constantly worried about their dogs. What does the dog need? Did I spend enough? Is he having a good day? Is he having a bad day? Is he going to be okay when we take him to the vet? Is the dog park going to not have too many pit bulls because my dog got bit by a pit bull? They're always just worrying about their dog to the point that they, ignore their fellow humans. And so it makes sense. This study proves that oversensitivity to the emotions of others is a part of this. And it's really just the perceived emotions of others. They don't actually know what's going on with other people. They're just hyper alert, trying to fix somebody's perceived problem. So excessive neurotransmitter activity, just any of them, can impact the prefrontal cortex, leading to cognitive dysfunction and emotional dysregulation. So it's like they found out with the extra oxytocin, it's dysregulating their emotions, making them be more emotional to some outside thing that they are so worried about. That's dog owners constantly hyper alert. And this imbalance can disrupt the brain's ability to manage higher level cognitive processes and executive functions. So if you watch the channel on YouTube called I Hate Dogs or I Hate Dogs live streams, one of the main things that they say in his videos is dog owners are stupid. Why are they so stupid? Is it low IQ? Why are they so dumb? They're letting their toddlers be killed. And I'm not saying that that's not a proper response on that channel, but this really explains it. You're basically taking your prefrontal lobe, pounding it with neurotransmitters in the incorrect way, and then you're not using it to make higher level functions. You're not having pattern recognition. Remember, I said we were going to come back to this part right here about pattern recognition of the human brain. It's like our own intelligence. Well, we're not recognizing the pattern of constant toddlers being killed, for example. We're not recognizing the pattern that pedophiles use dogs to hide their activities and intentions. We're not recognizing that pattern. We're not recognizing dog hoarding. We're not recognizing brachycephalic breeds that have to live a life of suffering just so people can get their dopamine hit for their Boston Terrier or other things. We're not recognizing any of the nasty, dirty, filthy patterns of dog ownership. And it seems to me like it's because we're killing our prefrontal lobe with all of these behaviors from dog ownership. And the studies have already been done. We don't need to go do a study. I don't need to prove it. If you read through these studies, it's pretty obvious. And dog owners will brag. And articles have been written about how dogs give us dopamine and oxytocin. But the benefits that we think we're getting from them, it's completely backwards. So now we're back to the aversive processing. Remember I mentioned aversive processing? So that is like a deer is not going to bring a coyote to hang out with its little baby deer. It's the same way that a person should not be bringing a fanged predator that won't get a job, that will never be part of the tax base, that will never tell your story when you die. You should not be bringing that into your house as a human. However, you get all of this dopamine from your dog, and somewhere in your brain, some part of your brain knows that something is not right here. But notice this. Dopamine tunes prefrontal outputs to orchestrate aversive processing. That is a long scientific way of saying if you get dopamine from something, despite the harmful effects, you will just ignore the harmful effects to get the dopamine. People will have a dog maul their toddler, and they'll keep the dog. A dog will run away, bite somebody, cause a car wreck, and then they'll adopt it back out to somebody. This aversive processing, we're hacking our own aversive processing because of the dopamine we get from dogs. It's like if you're standing in the road and you hear a car coming and the horn's honking, you're going to get out of the way. But, like, say a little toddler that lives in a house full of dogs, before they're even a year old, they're hearing their parents baby talk dogs. They're seeing dogs on TV. They're seeing dogs in the Instagram dog influencers. And so they're getting little shots of dopamine as little babies. And then they go walk in front of a dog. Then they go walk their dad's dog, and then they get smashed into the concrete. But yet they'll keep doing it all their life. They'll be 40 years old hoarding dogs. And it's because that dopamine screws over your aversive processing. You're willing to take this fanged predator into your house despite the stink, despite the cost, despite the fact that you are lending to the suffering of dogs by owning dogs. Yep. And here's just some examples, just from around the world. I'm sure most of us know this, but there's something called neglect in the partners. The husband and wife, they get a dog and then they're obsessed. My husband's obsessed with his dog. My wife is obsessed with my dog or his dog or whatever. They even have a show on TikTok here, Dog's Hilarious Obsession with Husband. The dog's got its paws up on the husband's freaking private parts. Freaking ridiculous. But this obsession with dogs, this is just constant dopamine, serotonin, cortisol, and every other neurotransmitter that our brain is supposed to modulate a certain way, but we're forcing our brain to do it in a different way. And as we know, dogs owners have strong attachments to their dogs. They describe it as an obsession. That's pretty easy to see. People dressing their dogs up in outfits, people putting sweaters on their husky dogs, even though huskies need to cool off. They'll sacrifice the health and happiness of their own dog just to, display their obsession. Constantly taking dogs where they don't belong. People that need dogs for PTSD, but then they got 3 dogs, 4 dogs. And they're always sacrificing this right here, the lives of themselves and the well-being of the dog, to display their obsession. And all this does is it just has a chronic effect on the prefrontal lobe, killing our pattern recognition, getting us to do more habits to keep dogs in our life. And one of the things that dog owners have a lot is guilt and grief. We did a longer video on this recently, and guilt and grief have all types of impacts. It can affect the prefrontal cortex, as it says here, responsible for decision-making, planning, and impulse control. Dog owners have poor impulse control. Examples, hoarding. Examples, owning multiple dogs yet you can't afford them. Yeah. And then they have this right here, emotional distress. And they go fix that emotional distress by getting another dog or buying more things for their dog or keeping their dog alive even though the thing is suffering and needs to be put down. Yeah. And as it says, this area becomes less active, leading to difficulties in thinking. It's because it gets atrophied. You're atrophying your prefrontal lobe, you're overworking it, and basically de-evolving yourself so that you can own a dog and get hits of dopamine all day. So there you go. That's how we're screwing around with our prefrontal lobe by worshiping dogs. And I want to mention aversive processing one more time, because a lot of the other channels out there, we've also been talking about how dog owners might have a parasite. Like how the parasite that gets into mice and makes them not be afraid of cats. We probably have some parasites that make it up to our brain. There's actually been some published cases of this. But to me, the aversion processing stands out. Dog owners get so much dopamine, they get the cycling of all those neurotransmitters, and their prefrontal lobe gets used to it. And then it kills your aversive processing. And it kills also your pattern recognition. If you look out in society, you see the patterns of stuff that dogs do that is not good. But then you just completely ignore it. Police officers killing dogs because dogs attack police officers. We completely ignore it. And thousands of other examples from dog ownership. Yep. See you guys later. Hope you like this one.